Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today because we're going to fundamentally change how you look at business risk. Whether you're a compliance officer, an investment manager, a corporate lawyer, or honestly just someone fascinated by the mechanics of modern business, you already know that due diligence is the absolute bedrock of safe decision making. But what if the very foundation we rely on is completely flawed? Today, we're setting the stage for a massive paradigm shift. We're moving way beyond the traditional checklist. We're skipping past those comforting green check marks, and we are going to learn the art of penetrative due diligence.
Okay, let's just dive right in with a bit of a mystery. Picture this. A few years ago, an investigator took on a major due diligence project. The target company, incredible, super cooperative. All their regulatory documents were absolutely pristine. The team's LinkedIn profiles were packed with pedigrees from top-tier companies. I mean, there wasn't a single negative media report in 3 years, and their social media was completely clear of complaints. So they went through the standard checklist, gave every single item a green checkmark, and published this rock-solid report saying, no material risk. And yet, about a year and a half later, the whole thing catastrophically failed. Why? Because the parent company, which wasn't investigated, completely collapsed. The parent's cash flow crisis cascaded right down, destroying the subsidiary's operational continuity and all its funds. You see, the investigator didn't make a technical error on their checklist. They investigated all the right things, but the object of their investigation was entirely wrong.
So, what does this actually show us? It highlights this terrifying cognitive dissonance in our industry. It's the danger of technical perfection. We all have this comforting illusion that if every conventional item on our list is checked off, we're safe. We've done our job, right? Well, no. The reality is that a flawless scorecard absolutely does not equal safety. When your methodology relies entirely on a predefined checklist, the actual risk can remain entirely unseen. It's literally like checking the tire pressure on a car while the engine is secretly on fire. You did your specific task perfectly, but the vehicle is for sure still going to crash.
Look, we really need to dismantle our foundational assumptions here. The old checklist methods fail completely in today's complex cross-border structures because of three extremely dangerous illusions that we all fall for. First, assuming the brand name equals the legal entity. The brand is just a narrative, right? The actual liability might sit in a totally different legal structure thousands of miles away. Second, confusing information overload with information sufficiency. Today, we're drowning in white papers and PR releases, which creates this dangerous illusion that just because we're reading a lot, we know everything. But we're only seeing what the company wants us to see. And third, believing a filled scorecard means the risk is assessed. A scorecard basically outsources your critical thinking to whoever designed the table. If a specific risk isn't on the table, you simply aren't going to look for it.
So we have to completely redefine what our job actually is. Modern due diligence isn't just passive reading. It's the active, investigative act of piercing through those curated public narratives to uncover the actual legal, financial, and operational entities that are bearing the risk. We've got to move away from just gathering what's easily handed to us and start aggressively hunting for the legal realities. It's a mindset shift. It's about moving from being a mere reader of documents to being a true detective of corporate structure. To do this effectively, we need a new way to visualize things. Let's get into part one, the 3 layers of truth, which is a completely new mental model for our investigations. This brilliantly illustrates exactly where we usually look versus where we should be looking. There is an inverse relationship between how easy information is defined and how dangerous the actual risks are. Look at the brand layer at the top. This is your PR, websites, media. The information density is huge, but the actual risk density, incredibly low. Below that is the entity layer, the legal special purpose vehicles, the holding companies. Information here is medium, a bit harder to find, but the risk density is high. And at the very bottom is the ecosystem layer. This is the auditors, the banks, the liquidity providers. Information here is very sparse, but the risk density is absolutely critical. I mean, if their bank fails, they fail. And here is the truly terrifying reality of our industry. 99% of due diligence stops entirely at that top brand layer. Investigators are making massive, multi-million-dollar decisions based on the company's own website, their own press releases, and their curated media presence. Think about what this actually means in practice. By only looking at the easily accessible, project-controlled brand layer, investigators are essentially letting the target grade their own homework. It's just a completely self-fulfilling loop of positive reinforcement. So the obvious question is, how do we actually pierce through these layers to survive? That brings us to Section 2, the 7-step penetrative checklist, which is our actionable toolkit. Let's quickly walk through this defense, step by step, to see how it takes us deeper into the company's actual reality. First, you verify the real issuing identity against the brand name. Second, look at the holding company's health. Are they genuinely financially sound? Third, check the true scope of their licenses. Fourth, verify real auditor independence. Fifth, cross-verify their funding sources outside of their own press releases. Sixth, assess the fragility of their service provider network. And seventh, look at the historical failure precedents of the founding team. Following this list takes us from the superficial brand right down into the actual mechanics of the business. Now let's zoom in on a couple of specific, really common traps here. Step 3 is such a classic trap. We love to think of a regulatory license as a simple binary yes or no. The business development team will proudly hand you a shiny certificate and say, look, we're licensed. But here's the secret. A project will claim to be licensed, but when you actually sit down and read the authorization scope, it only covers a tiny, irrelevant fraction of their core business. They're basically using a narrow, specialized license as a marketing halo for their unregulated, high-risk activities. You absolutely always have to read the actual authorization scope. And step 4 is another massive blind spot. When a company casually says they're audited, you have to stop and question the auditor's independence. Is it a full audit, or is it actually just agreed-upon procedures, which is a vastly less rigorous legal standard? Furthermore, does this supposedly independent auditor also work for the parent company, or maybe they act as a consultant for the founders? If the auditor's financial incentives are deeply tied to the company's success across multiple channels, then that core anchor of third-party trust is completely eroded. All right, now that we've covered the hard facts, let's shift our strategy in Section 3, reverse engineering the BD. Analyzing the silence. We really need to transition from active fact-finding to the art of analyzing what the business development team is strategically leaving out. This right here is the difference between basic execution and true mastery. On the left, we have fact-checking. Verifying the 10 statements the BD team actively told you is just basic low-level execution. You're just proving that what they chose to share is technically true. But on the right, we have gap analysis. This is about discovering the vital information they actively chose to omit. The real mastery of due diligence is reverse engineering their selective truth to find the gaping holes they left behind on purpose. To do this, you need a weapon. And this right here is the ultimate anchor question you must silently ask yourself during every single pitch, and while reading every single glossy white paper. What is the one thing they least want me to ask? You don't necessarily have to say it out loud right away, but keeping this echoing in your mind forces you to look at the negative space of their presentation. It acts like a compass, pointing directly toward their hidden vulnerabilities. Building on that, here are 4 reverse questions you should use to construct a failure path that cuts right through their polished narrative. First, what do they least want asked? Second, if this project fails, what is the most likely path to that failure? Third, looking at their marketing, what is the least verifiable public claim they're currently making? And fourth, when they deflect an issue by saying, well, we've always done it this way, what is the real, hidden basis for that standard? Answering these will immediately break the spell of the BD pitch. Now, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Section 4, due diligence in the AI era, evolve or be replaced. Everyone is asking if they're going to be replaced by algorithms. The short answer is yes, if you don't evolve. Let's look at the division of labor moving forward. AI will absolutely replace the execution side of fact-checking, the brand layer. I mean, it can scrape data, fill out scorecard templates, and answer predefined questions infinitely faster than any of us can. But AI cannot replicate human cognition. It takes a human to notice the silence. It takes a human to link isolated and seemingly unrelated signals from the ecosystem layer, and most importantly, to ask the unprompted, undefined questions. AI answers the checklist. Humans are the ones who realize the checklist is wrong. I'm going to be super real with you for a second and challenge you with a stark reality. If your job today is simply answering 20 predefined questions on a scorecard, you are going to be replaced in 3 years. Survival and success in this industry mean transitioning your skills from executing the known tasks to defining the unknown questions. You literally have to move from being a data gatherer to a risk architect. This quote honestly just hits the nail on the head for the core theses of this entire explainer. The gap between a good and great compliance officer isn't what they check, but realizing what they aren't checking. True mastery in due diligence isn't about being a relentless, box-checking robot. It's an exercise in profound, targeted curiosity and, quite frankly, a healthy dose of self-doubt. It's about finishing a report and having the cognitive discipline to sit back and ask yourself, wait, what did I completely miss? So, I want to leave you with this one provocative final thought. Next time you're at your desk, pull up the very last due diligence report you submitted. Be totally honest with yourself. Did you just investigate the brand narrative, or did you actually pierce through to the entity and ecosystem reality? Use the penetrative framework we talked about today. Hunt for the missing information, ask those reverse questions, and please, stop relying on the green checkboxes. The real story is always hiding just beneath the surface. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you next time.